Hello, this is Secor Sabor, and I wanted to record another video involving another tip of the day. And this tip of the day has to do with pasting in data source locations when you set up your data source on a component, particularly one that does check the data source template. So this is what I'm talking about. I'm going to go to this particular page, one I just created out of the blue, and I'm going to go to presentation details and go to final layout. When I click on a component, let's go with the image one, right? Many of these components are set up so that when you click on browse, if you happen to click on the wrong data source, you get an error that tells you that the data source you selected is not a valid selection to keep you from choosing data sources that does not apply to the component in question. But very often what I've seen content editors do is that rather than select the data source, particularly if that data source is not in the asset path, they'll paste in the location of a data source, which is fine because sometimes you have to do something unique. But the problem is when you paste it in, it doesn't invoke this check. And I'll show you what I mean. I'll go ahead and click on cancel, and I'll hit a cancel a few times to get back out to the content tree area. Let's say for some weird reason I want that image component to use my text data source. Now, I'd be willing to bet that if I'm able to go to navigate links, let me give this a try, and I find the image component, it should be this one. All right. If I look for the data source template, that's the parameter template I want. There it is. It'll make it clear that it's for a specific type of data source, which is an image. So there's no way that this text data source should be applied to this image component. But, nothing in life is perfect. There is a way to get around it if I'm not careful. Sometimes what someone will do, if they want to use a data source that they're meant to use with a component, but for some reason the data source selector is not locating it where it's located, what they want to do is copy the data source path and then paste it into the data source field for that component. But what if they're pasting the wrong data source into the wrong component? For instance, I'm going to overwrite the image one data source and use the text one. There we go. Here's the problem though. I'm about to click on OK and note that there's nothing testing or letting me know that this data source is not the right one for this component. And that's because if you simply copy and paste and click on OK, there is no opportunity for it to do this check. So what I would tell anyone is that if they paste a data source into the data source field, perhaps because it's in a location that the data source selector doesn't immediately recognize, click on Browse. Make sure that it's okay with your data source. If I click on Browse, note that for the data source I currently pasted in, it's telling me it's not a valid selection. And that's what it should do if I paste in a data source that doesn't represent what the data source template is telling it is the proper data source. So in this example, I'm going to click on image one. Note that the error goes away because that is the proper data source, and then click on OK. Okay, so my advice again is that if you decide to paste in a data source because it's located in a place that the browse doesn't recognize as a place where you can grab the data source from, because the data source location on that particular component is not designed to look outside its immediate assets folder or data folder, then when you paste it in, click on Browse. See if the check is happy with the data source. If it is, you should be fine. You won't get an error. If it's not, you'll get an error like this one, and that tells you that the one you just pasted in is not the one it should use. Okay, And that's all I needed to say on this topic. So I hope you enjoyed this video and see you guys next time.